Financial leadership is changing. CFOs no longer record history, they make history. This podcast will help you become a better leader, strategic thinker, and digital visionary. Welcome to Secrets of Rockstar CFOs, the ultimate podcast for chief financial officers. Follow along as Jack McCullough engages in exciting chats with accomplished CFOs, learning how they overcame obstacles and positioned their companies for the future. Here's your host, Jack McCullough.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs. I'm your host, Jack McCullough. You can follow us online at rockstarcfos.com. Before we begin, I want to give a shout out to our two sponsors, Payhawk and Planful, who make this and all of our episodes possible. We have a great guest today, so let's get to it. Rock on. Well, I'm really happy for the guest we have today. This is actually one of the most interesting companies that's been represented on the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs, and plus the CFO is just a great guy. So I want to welcome Lucas Ramirez. Lucas is the CFO of Grameen America. Lucas, welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs.
Thank you, Jack. Super excited to be here. A big fan of your show, a regular listener. So just delighted to be here to share some of my journey with your audience.
Oh, great. You're a regular listener. I have two regular listeners and they're anonymous. So now I've identified half of my audience.
Who one is, right?
Yeah. So, next time a potential sponsor asks, I can tell them what half of our audience is like. So, but cool. But anyway, you work for like an absolutely fascinating and, an important organization. And, it's one of those, I think a lot of people know the global company, but why don't you share a little bit about Grameen America and what your mission is and other things.
Sure, Jack. Indeed, a fascinating organization. So Grameen America is the largest and fastest growing microfinance institution in the U.S. Our mission at Grameen is to help low-income entrepreneurial women build businesses to achieve financial mobility. I usually think about this in terms of the why. Like, why do we exist? And we exist really to change the life trajectories of low-income minority entrepreneurs that have been marginalized from the financial system. So that's what we do. I think of it as we are here to change life trajectories. How do we do that? We do that through, running this little bank that grants loans, and we do this through a technical assistance organization that provides women with training, with health and business education, and the community and the network for them to succeed as entrepreneurs. Grameen America was founded by Muhammad Yunus. He's a Nobel laureate, known as the father of microfinance. He really felt that women can lift themselves out of poverty through their entrepreneurial spirit if they got the right opportunity. So he started giving micro loans to poor women in Bangladesh in the early 80s. Grameen America has disbursed over $4 billion in micro loans to about 190,000 entrepreneurs in the U.S. Since its existence, since it was founded in 2008. But we're just scratching the surface in what we can do. We've penetrated less than 1% of the addressable market. It's a huge market of low-income entrepreneurial women in the U.S. that are unbanked or underbanked. And over the next decade, we have a very ambitious growth plan. We expect to grow our disbursement by 10 times to 40 billion and reach 750,000 borrowers, which is about 4 times where we are today.
Wow, that's what an important mission and what a great story. I don't exactly know a bunch of Nobel Peace Prize winners. Have you met him in the course of doing your job?
I have, yes.
Yeah.
He's the chairman of our board. He's still in Bangladesh, but he comes to a in-person board meeting in New York once a year, and there I get to meet him. And he is a really amazing visionary and inspirational leader who is really flipped some of the core finance principles upside down. He actually proved that through the right program and with the right incentives, low-income people are actually very creditworthy, which is in contrast to traditional finance, which says low-income people, subprime, high risk, high default rates. Our default rate is 0.2% of the portfolio, which is better than any bank. So it's really impressive what Professor Yunus has done and the movement he's created around the world.
0.2%. I'm not in your industry, but yeah, that's, I mean, how many investments are 99.8% sure, right? So
Indeed. I mean, I followed financial institutions throughout my career for over 20 years, and this is the best credit quality that I have seen, even though we're lending at the margin of borrowers and what you would consider the most vulnerable segments of the population. But it just shows that with the right program, technical assistance, community aspect of it, they are actually very creditworthy.
absolutely fantastic. So I want to talk more about that, but first I'd love to share a little about your own background with our audience. First of all, where'd you grow up?
I actually grew up in Colombia, in South America, and you know, as people probably know, it's a country that's had its fair share of challenges, and which I think I view as something that's formative. I mean, having the opportunity to grow in a country like Colombia, a low-income country, poor in the midst of a lot of violence, and then coming to the US and seeing the opportunities here, it just gives you the whole spectrum of things. So grew up there, spent about half of my career in Latin America and half in the US. I'm a recovered investment banker, and I view that journey of going from a small town in the Andean mountains of Colombia to Wall Street and working at Merrill Lynch, which was, you know, before it was acquired by Bank of America in the financial crisis, which I was there, you know, one of the premier bulge bracket investment banks in New York, was really a formative journey for me. I mean, it taught me that with discipline, focus, and hard work, you can pretty much achieve what you put your mind into. So that was just an amazing journey to go from a small town in Colombia to Merrill Lynch in New York.
Yeah, no, that's a fascinating journey. And I often ask this question, and you know, I'm curious. Hopefully my listeners are too, but your answer is kind of interesting to me. What was your first job?
Interesting. I reflected into this, and initially I was going to answer about my first real professional job, but when I was my true real first job was I was still in college in Miami, and wanted to make a few dollars, and ended up working for a Colombian underwear manufacturer in Miami in their warehouse. They were entering the US market from scratch, and they just hired me to join the team and work in their warehouse, pretty much doing everything from taking orders, shipping boxes, keeping the books, just about everything. So I did that for about 6 months. As I finished college, it was my the first time I earned a buck on my own, and it was just interesting just to see how a business comes together, and it was really it taught me the value of having to earn a living. Up to that point, everything was just really handed down to me from my parents. So I learned the value of earning a living, even in a low-skilled job, which I would characterize what I did there as a low-skilled job.
Yeah, but you learn everything, right? The value of the dollar, it gives you a work ethic. And then,
Exactly.
you as probably most of my guests have been, you've achieved some good career success and hopefully been financially rewarded along the way. But it just gives you the value and just makes you appreciate it that much more. I think when you have those kind of low skill jobs in your career, because I've had people like, their first job was an investment banker when they were 22. It's like, good for them. They're a great place to start. But I think maybe people who worked in McDonald's, or in your case, in a warehouse, you just sort of develop an appreciation for things. So
Exactly. And it helps. And even in jobs like my job today, where we have a big frontline, workforce that is in front of customers every day.
makes sense. Cool. So I actually, my next question was about your first, I don't want to call it a real job, but maybe your first professional job, and not focusing on that so much, but you have a very interesting path to becoming a CFO. And I'm wondering if you can give us a few of the highlights.
Sure. So as I said, I'm a recovered investment banker, and that includes an initial close to 5-year stint in equity research at Merrill Lynch in New York, covering financial institutions. So that I did that for about 5 years. That was very formative in terms of sharpening my analytical skills, really learning the fundamentals of financial modeling, valuation, value drivers, industry analysis. As you know, in these jobs in equity research, you run valuations, you try to make calls on stocks, you talk to a lot of institutional investors and the trading desks, and very, very demanding. And it requires a high level of analytical rigor, because you're putting your numbers out there, you're putting your forecast, you're even putting your valuation, saying what you think a stock should be worth, and having to go in front of very smart institutional investors from the top asset managers and hedge funds of the world to pitch an investment thesis. So did that for about 5 years, then moved back to Latin America to work in investment banking at one of the largest financial groups in the region. Did a lot of M&A and capital markets work, helping companies expand across Latin America via M&A, and then raise the capital for that expansion via equity or debt offerings. Did that capital markets investment banking stint for about 20 years, and then I decided then that I wanted to transition to a CFO role, and took a year off. Actually went to school at your same school, Jack. So we're colleagues from the MIT Sloan School. So I spent a year sort of transitioning from investment banking to more managerial roles. But I guess I'll stop there and see if you want to discuss that transition.
Well, I'm always curious, because I can see where you're prepared. I'm always curious, like the people who influenced you during the course of your career. When you look back, are there any critical mentors or people that just made a really, hopefully positive impact on your career growth and influence you to be the type of leader that you are today?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I mean, even from the early days, when your job is very technical and you're an individual contributor, one woman that I admire, she was a brilliant economist. She was my boss at Merrill Lynch, a Peruvian woman. She really mentored me in terms of how to really do the job well, and how to analyze a company, how to value a company, and how to build an investment thesis. So that in the early days of my career, and then obviously along the way, different folks, including my current boss, which is a great mentor. I mean, she's a very accomplished former Fortune 500 CEO who's on the board of Apple and on the board of several other Fortune 500 companies. And I really consider her not just a boss, but a mentor, and learn a lot from her strategic thinking, her leadership skills, the way she communicates. So I think you have different mentors along the way. In the earlier part of your career, they tend to be more on the technical side, when you're more of an individual contributor, and you grow up the ranks more by proving that you can do things very well. And as you evolve in your career, though, that portfolio of mentors start to shift from more, leadership, people who can think about your career, your leadership style, your communication style, how to make decisions, how to be a more strategic thinker, and help you add sort of breadth of perspectives.
No, that's great. We've all had people like that. Sounds like this was an important one. So, but I want to bring you to the current role, because that's really a fascinating organization. But, you're on a great path, awesome career in investment banking, just completed the Sloan Fellows Program. I was a traditional MBA. I recall the Fellows Program just being a lot more intense than what we dealt with. But so what attracted you to Grameen in particular?
Sure. I mean, the obvious answer, given that it is a leading social enterprise, is the mission and the impact. So that's when it was a unique, almost once in a lifetime opportunity to combine finance with social impact. Its leadership and its board were certainly very important. We have an amazing board of directors of very accomplished leaders in the financial and social space. Also the nature of the role itself, because it was kind of wearing two hats. One is running the finance organization, FP&A, accounting, treasury, IR, and making sure that finance supports the execution of the strategy of the company, but also a second hat, which is a seat at the in the executive team, where you wear a more cross-functional hat and really are there as an architect of executing the strategy of the organization. Also the growth potential, as I mentioned, I think initially, the addressable market of low-income entrepreneurial women in the US is about 10 million, and we have 100,000 active borrowers. So we are just scratching the surface in terms of the impact that we can have, and the organization is scaling very rapidly. So the opportunity to come in and work with the leadership team to help architect the next phase of growth just seemed like a very exciting place to come and spend the next stage of my career. Being associated with the movement that Professor Muhammad Yunus created around the world, social impact and the social business, which is using business principles in an enterprise setting to have long-lasting social impact. So it's a place where you wake up every day very excited to come to work, because we're mostly remote, because we know that if we succeed, there'll be thousands of women that are succeeding and that are really were able to change their life trajectory. So really a number of elements drew me to this role.
Well, I think that's fantastic, because how many times do we get to make that type of an impact in people's lives during the course of our career? So it's great you're doing it, but I want to explore a little bit the impact on you, because you went from a situation, you're a banker, analytical finance, but now you're in a company that's mission focused, not financial focused. So how does that change basically your leadership style?
Sure. Great question. And I would start by saying that the answer is it doesn't change it that much, because, as I said, you apply a business mindset to solve a social problem. So you have to run the organization like it's a business. So just a bit of context on what is a social business, and Professor Yunus actually wrote an entire book about this. It is using business principles in an enterprise setting to solve a social problem at scale. So the company must be profitable. It should make enough revenue to cover its expenses. So I view it more really as a non-dividend company than as a non-for-profit company, because the profits, and in the case of Grameen, where we're a lender and our balance sheet consumes a lot of capital, we need those profits to really help grow the balance sheet and strengthen the balance sheet. So we need to show strong financial outcomes so that we can attract loan capital. We have a number of banks and impact investors that help us fund the business, and they need to see very strong financial results, because they want to get their money back. They want to get repaid. But you also have to show social impact. You have to have proven social impact so that you can attract the philanthropic capital that is also important to grow the organization. So I think we use this same principles: strategic thinking, data driven, unit economics. None of that goes away. You still apply that, but you just now want to achieve financial outcomes, for the purpose of not creating shareholder wealth, but for the purpose of creating long-lasting social impact. So the fundamentals don't change, and that's why also being a 20-year sort of investment banker, finance professional, I joined this because I could fully exercise all my knowledge and experience, because none of that goes away. It's just that the why is different. It's not to create shareholder value, but to create long-lasting social impact. You have to broaden your lens. You have to learn a bit more about how to measure social impact. What are the metrics? How can you prove that impact? And we've done it in a very significant way, and we can talk about that later if you like. And always have a learning mentality, because sometimes you have to deploy capital and it's not going to have an immediate financial return, but you're going to learn something that allows you to broaden the reach in what you're trying to do, or deepen the impact that you're trying to have on your constituencies. And also you have a broader stakeholder view, because you have philanthropists, which are kind of like your shareholders, you have investors, you have the board, you have your borrowers, you have to deal with regulators, you have to try to influence the broader financial inclusion ecosystem. So I would say that it actually, you have to up your leadership game in this social business setting, I think relative to a commercial enterprise.
Interesting. So one thing, when we spoke a couple of weeks ago, you talked about, when in the topic of leadership and becoming a good just business person generally, is getting outside your swim lane. And maybe that's a common phrase, but I hadn't heard that until you said it. But can you elaborate a little bit on that and what you meant, and how it applies to your current role?
Sure. Absolutely. And I think that's going to define the success of future CFOs, is just the ability to get outside your swim lane, be more cross-functional, look at different problems. And an example of this is when I joined Grameen, I went on a listening tour. So in my first 3 months, I said, I'm just going to do a lot of sense making and try to understand this organization very well before I actually start making decisions. And in that listening tour, I asked everyone the same questions, one of which was, what is the biggest bottleneck for growth? And everyone, there was a key theme across those answers, which was staffing of the branches. There's high turnover due to reasons such as pay, stressful job, lack of clear career path, technology, and the like. So given that one of the roles of a CFO, and one of the roles that I think I have in this organization, is to unlock the constraints for growth and to allocate capital towards that, work together with HR, with operations, with tech. I looked at the problem from a broader lens. What is the real cost of all this turnover that we're having, of really having to replace over a third of our workforce, of our frontline workforce every year? So we developed a plan to invest more in people, staff the branches better, pay better, create a career path in coaching, also change their work design so the work is less stressful, build the technology tools to make their life easier. And this led to turnover going from 36% to 20%, despite significant investments in people and paying better and staffing the branches better. Our profits are increasing 60% year on year, and the organization is really firing on all cylinders. So I think the way we achieve that is taking a broad look at the problem. I think the most complex problems that end up in front of you as a CFO they don't come with a functional label. They don't come with a finance label. They are systemic problems in which you have to look at it from different lenses. So I think that's just a good example of how finance can come and contribute actively with the capital allocation, the analytics, the thought leadership to help solve a problem that at first blush looks like if it was a human resource problem, but actually these problems are more interrelated, and you have to take a systemic view of them. And I think that's essential to become an effective CFO, and not just look at things from the number standpoint.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So cool. Earlier, you touched upon your relationship with Andrea. Is it Young or Jung?
Young.
Young. Okay, thank you. But she's a legend in American business. In fact, I think I shared with you, I tried and some other companies to recruit her to speak at one of our events, but I was unsuccessful. But I'm like the Canadian Mountain Police. I eventually will get her. But that's such a critical relationship between the CEO and the CFO. I've heard the CFO referred to almost as a deputy CEO. But what is that relationship like? Running this organization together.
Sure. No, I'm certainly. It's a privilege to work for her and learn from her leadership skills and her strategic thinking. I mean, I would say also one of the things that drew me to this organization was her passion for the mission. I mean, given her background, she could have done a million other things, and she decided 10 years ago to come work for this small microfinance entity that didn't have a proven model yet. So she's really passionate about about woman empowerment. So, but first, I mean, I think in terms of relationships between CEO and CFO, a couple of things I would, I mean, it's obviously a key relationship. I think of the CEO at times as like the flag planter, and the CFO the road builder, to help us get there. The CEO is very much in charge of the vision, the why we do what we do. The CFO puts structure, processes, systems, and is more in charge of the how. That's how I view this relationship. It's putting in the people, processes, systems, the rhythm of the execution of strategy, so that we can achieve our goals. It's a relationship that has to be built on trust. You have to be able to have an open and candid conversation, both about the opportunities and the challenges. Have open communication. So we meet weekly, and I really try to ask the right questions to make sure that I always know what's on her mind, what are the priorities, and what are the key organizational things where I should jump in, not only from a CFO role, but from an enterprise leader standpoint. It's also important, Jack, I think, to know when to pull the CEO into finance-related matters and be selective on that. So I strategically bring Andrea into some of the conversations with our investors, because there's no one better than her to come and tell the story, generate excitement about the mission, build credibility. So she's actually the number one tool that I have when I need to go and pitch Grameen America to an impact investor. I bring her along, and she usually does an amazing job convincing them to invest in our organization. So you really have to know when to pull them into your workflows.
So she's a true financial expert. So, it's which cuts both ways, I suppose, to a certain extent to some people. So cool. But I want to chat a little bit. You touched upon the fact that your company, I think you said it's mostly remote. It's not completely remote. But how do you manage that from a talent management and a cultural standpoint? What's that like?
Oh, I mean, it's certainly challenging, and particularly in when we're growing the team so fast. So our headquarters are fully remote. The staff in our branches does go to the branches because they need to meet customers on a daily basis. We meet once a quarter now in New York for headquarters meetings. So it is a challenge for us without a doubt. And in terms of managing the team, a few things that I think of is, I try to flip the org chart around and actually think that I work for the team, not vice versa. And there's a term for this. It's like servant leadership. Your role is to make sure that they succeed, because if they succeed in their role, the finance organization succeed, and then that helps the overall company succeed. I think the key there is really to over communicate in a virtual setting, and it's hard because communication is more scripted, because you have to set up a Zoom meeting, have a specific agenda for that meeting. We meet every week just as a team to go over the table, if you will, staff meeting, know what everyone is working on, share ideas, give people an update of what I'm seeing in my discussions in the executive team. So I think it's important to keep everyone in the team abreast of the broader picture. Always tie what they're doing to the big picture. Otherwise, when they're on their own, doing their own individual work in their house, they can get disengaged if you're not constantly bringing them in and tying their work to the bigger picture. But in addition to the team meetings, I do one-on-ones with everyone on the team, including the most junior folks. In fact, we have interns on our team, and I do one-on-one even with the interns. And you just have to ask the right question. I try to adhere to the rule of 30% talking, where you tell them, you give them an update on what's going on org-wide, but 70% of the time you should just ask questions, listen, and just have an open conversation on how are things going, what's working well, what's not working well, anything that you would like to do differently, and making sure that you really are able to capture that information that you miss because you're not in an office setting. It just requires you to really sharpen your listening skills to be able to do it in a virtual setting and ask the right questions and ask open-ended questions such as, how are things going? Is that anything not working? Anything that you would change from your workflow? Anything I can help with? So again, to the concept of servant leader is that you're here to help them succeed. And I think another operating principle that I have is really empowerment plus accountability. I try to set direction, gain commitment to that direction, ensure you're constantly communicating the strategic priorities of the organization, but let people really fill in the blanks and give them the autonomy to design their job. They're probably better at it than you are because they know the specifics a bit more. So you give them empowerment, you set direction, gain their commitment, you empower them, but also hold them accountable and establish clear goals.
That's a great answer. So, and it's an ongoing challenge, right? More and more companies are just going to go that way. So
very difficult to build a culture in a virtual setting.
So, one thing that I'm curious about, you have a large number of small dollar transactions, I think it's fair to say. So I'm just sort of wondering, what's the tech infrastructure at Grameen America to make it all happen? I'm guessing you don't run the company on QuickBooks. So
no, without a doubt. In fact, there are thousands of small transactions, 100,000 per week to be more exact. Grameen, and one of the reasons for our success is one of the things that has allowed us to do this, and this predates me as the organization's vision to invest in technology ahead of time. This used to be a very paper-based, cash-based model, and we went digital, cashless, and there was a big digital transformation that started a few years ago. In fact, the business school at UC Berkeley wrote a business case about Grameen's digital transformation and the pivotal role of technology in scaling. We changed to a cloud-based system for our core banking operations called Mambu, and that was essential just to be able to absorb the volume that we have right now of transactions. We now are investing heavily in a borrower app, so the customer, the member, can self-service her much better. She can apply for the loans through the app, view her balances, and it allows us not only to improve the user experience and generate efficiencies on the back end, but also to much better capture data. So even in a high touch model like ours, where our relationship staff meets with members every week, often in Zoom settings, embedding technology in everything we do is essential for scale. Like, you really can't scale to 100,000 customers and the 300,000 that I mentioned that we plan to have over the next few years unless you embed technology. So organizational-wide, we are much further along in this journey than, let's say, in the finance function itself, where CFOs are using technology not just to automate repetitive tasks, but for more predictive analytics. We're earlier in that journey, initially on the very transactional side of things. So we get 100,000 payments of loans every week. We now have a system that automatically matches that cash coming in to what is recorded in our core core banking system to make sure that the books are accurate every day. So we're embedding technology in everything we do. Grameen has been very deliberate about this being a high touch plus high tech model. In finance in the future, we will use technology not just for automating repetitive tasks, but more so for actually our FP&A work in visualization and dashboarding, so automating financial analysis, and then down the road for more predictive analytics, such as being able to estimate a borrower's propensity to churn, a borrower's propensity to default, to forecast pockets of growth. So it's an evolution where you go from the basic tasks and automation to more sophisticated analytics.
No, that's a great answer. So cool. So I want to ask you a question, since you grew up professionally, banking, and you've got an MBA. So you're probably a very quantitative, analytical person in your professional life. So what are some of the metrics you use to measure the impact that the organization's making, maybe financial and otherwise? Because you're all about the social impact as much as anything, right? So are there some key metrics that you look towards to, make sure that you're performing to your goals?
Absolutely. And that's also one of the differences between working in a social enterprise, is that you not just look at the financial metrics, but you look at the social metrics and even the operating metrics. Like in any company, and I view the financial metrics as a lagging indicator. And first, you have to look at what's going on the operations, the customers, the churn, the different operating KPIs then result in the financial metrics. But on the finance side, we look at really the same metrics that any bank would look at: capital adequacy, credit quality, liquidity, non-performing loans, unit economics, return on capital. And as I said, it's a social business, so you have to apply the same business principles. You have to layer onto that the social impact. Things that we look at Grameen is obviously the number of borrowers that we are able to impact, the number of loans that we give out, the size of the loans. We measure the impact that we have on their business income, on their savings, on their credit scores, because we don't require a credit score for them to join the program. We start reporting to the bureaus, and we see if our reporting of their successful repayment has improved their credit scores, and then they can have access to other more mainstream financial products. But we also measure, and this was done through a randomized control trial, which is a gold standard test done by MDRC, a third-party organization, where we did a 3-year study of what was the impact of women being in our program versus a control group that was not in the program. And we found statistically significant evidence of improvements in income, savings, credit scores, reduction in material hardship. So these are really a number of social impact metrics that we track and that are very important to get impact investors excited about investing in us, because they need to see the impact in addition to the financial strength.
That's fantastic. So I want to step back a little bit from your company. And the CFO role, it's evolved so much since I was a CFO, and it continues to do so. I'm curious what your thoughts are on what the future of financial leadership is going to be like.
Great question, Jack. I think the role is becoming much more exciting. It's becoming broader. It's becoming much more cross-functional. In fact, there's a study from McKinsey that shows that the number of discrete functions reporting into the CFO role has almost doubled over the past few years, from 3 to 4 to 6, 7, or 8. And these can include procurement, investor relations, data and analytics, risk management. So many more discrete organizational functions are falling into the CFO's role. So it's becoming obviously more complex. And this is a phrase that I throw often in our leadership meetings, is that I want people not to view me not as the CF. No, I'm not the traditional CFO that is there to say no to things, but as the CF go. My role is not to say no. My role is to really think hard about what to say yes, and how to allocate capital towards the execution of the mission and towards the growth of the organization. So you're in a seat where you can allocate capital to both exploration, which is innovation, but also exploitation, which is generating efficiencies in the current operation. So in my role, and I think I mentioned this at the beginning, I think as my CFO role was wearing 2 hats. One is running the finance function, ensuring that the trains run on time, that we have the capital to run the business, that we provide the analytics, the reporting, investor relations, and the like, but also having a cross-functional seat at the leadership team, where you're trying to add value to cross-functional challenges such as the one that I mentioned on human resources and reducing the turnover in our field in our field staff. It's obviously a role that is very much driven by technology these days, and you have to embed technology in everything you do if you want to really scale the organization, which is what we're doing at Grameen America.
But cool. So I want to get back a little bit of your personal life. You got a lot going on. And, so how do you do it with the work-life balance thing? It's so important that you not just work 90 hours a week. So do you have any advice for people trying to achieve it?
Oh, it's a constant challenge, Jack. And that's why I think of it more as work-life harmony instead of balance, because it's really hard to have balance with such a demanding role. I mean, a few things. I think it's really important to take care of yourself first. If you don't really take good care of yourself, manage your energy, manage your mental and physical health, you just can't show up in your job with the level of energy that you need. The way I try to manage this is, first, you really need to be strict and set boundaries around your time, because the CFO role in an organization that is scaling rapidly can consume 100% of your time. So you have to be strict with your boundaries. And I personally try to keep a very disciplined routine of physical and mental health in terms of exercise and meditation. It's things that I do almost every day. I used to not do it when I traveled for work, just because you're in hotels and you're running around. But now I have an app, and I even exercise for 15 minutes in my hotel room if I can in the morning, and that just changes your energy and the way you show up in meetings, and the level of sort of energy that you bring into the conversations.
Okay, that's a great answer. And also, I mentioned work-life balance. You said energy and whatnot. So I was instructed to ask you this question. I know you're a runner. What's on your playlist?
What's on my playlist? I mean, usually, so when I run in the street outside, I don't listen to anything. But when I hop on a treadmill at home or in a hotel, I listen to podcasts. So one is this podcast. Obviously, it's a must. It's a must. I really enjoy listening to the stories and journeys of other finance leaders. Another one that I often listen to is called A Bit of Optimism, and this is hosted by Simon Sinek, which is more about personal development and leadership. Sinek is the author of a great book called Start with the Why.
He's an icon. So
yeah, and he has a great podcast for inspiration and personal leadership. I recently started listening to audiobooks, and there's one that I finished a few weeks ago that I highly recommend. It's called Outlive by a doctor called Peter Attia. Very interesting and well-researched book about lifespan and health span. What can you start doing in terms of nutrition, exercise, mental health, sleep, in order to achieve longevity, so that you actually have health span in those final years of your life.
So cool. So I just want to make sure we've got this, and listeners, sit up, take note. He listens to 2 podcasts, mine and Simon Sinek's. So that's probably the one and only time in history that he and I have ever been mentioned in the same sentence. So I'm going to milk that a little bit. So thank you for that. So,
Sure.
I didn't know what your answer was going to be, and Jess, who produces the podcast, she encouraged me to answer that. I was guessing it was going to be music, and because she knows my taste, what music I listen to, the same music I listened to in 1984, AC/DC and Van Halen. So I was thinking maybe you and I had the same musical taste or something. So cool. Okay, well, I always like to conclude by asking CFOs what their advice is for the next generation of CFOs. And you're in a mission-focused organization, so you can tweak it towards that or not, as your choice.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So in general, I mean, I guess 3 things is obviously have financial depth. That's table stakes, but really seek breadth of perspectives. Really go outside your swim lane, learn about HR, learn about operations, learn about tech, strategy, become well-rounded. I think the success of the CFO role will be defined more so by the ability to go outside of your swim lane. The second thing is build a network, invest in your relationships inside and outside of the organization. You will need a strong operational network inside the organization to get things done, and you will need a strong developmental network outside of the organization just to broaden your perspective and seek new ideas. I would advise, I read a book early in my career called Never Eat Alone, and the author is Keith Ferrazzi, and that really changed my perspective on building a network. Sometimes people view networking as something that's kind of like a dirty word, but it is essential to succeed as a CFO or in any business role, is building that network, over investing in it even before you need it. And lastly, really become tech savvy. Technology is transforming all industries. The finance function, tech and AI will not replace the CFO role, but I think tech savvy CFOs will be much more effective and successful in adding value to their organizations. In terms of mission, I would say the social enterprise world is growing significantly. It's becoming an important type of organization in the world. The impact investing space is also growing very rapidly. The assets under management in the industry have now exceeded $1 trillion, I read recently. So I think if you're going to join a mission-driven organization, as a CFO, the thing that you really have to ensure is, one, that you're aligned with the mission and that it's something that you're passionate about. And two is that make sure that it's a social business that values financial rigor. And all of them do in the same way as Grameen America does. When I was looking at this role, I understood that financial rigor was very much valued, and it was a very important part of what we were doing. So just make sure that if you're going to join a social enterprise, it's one that is financially disciplined and where financial metrics and rigor are really taken into consideration for making decisions.
I think that's sage advice, my friend. So thank you, Lucas. So with that, I'm just going to give you the final word.
Well, this has been a fantastic.
I put you on the spot.
Yeah, this has been a fantastic conversation, Jack, and I think it has provided me with a great opportunity to step back, reflect on my career, reflect on my journey, reflect on this role and how I should think about it going forward. I'd encourage listeners and folks to set aside time throughout the year to strategically think about their careers. I think it has never been a better time to be a CFO. The role is much broader. It's more cross-functional, requires strong interaction both internally with other functions, but also externally with stakeholders such as investors and board members. And it has become a key driver for strategy execution and for measuring and managing the value of companies. Importantly, I think the CFO role is a role where you can never stop learning. There's always new challenges that come your way. So for people who are passionate about lifelong learning and who have intellectual curiosity, this is a fantastic role. So on that note, I've learned a lot from listening to other CFOs on your podcast, and look forward to continuing to listen to others and learn about their journey.
Thanks again to Payhawk and Planful for their support of the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs. Rock on.
Thank you for listening to this episode. To continue your exploration of this role that focuses on strategy, leadership, finance, and technology, listen to more episodes of the show at rockstarcfos.com. Join this revolution, episode by episode. Push yourself to achieve great things and unlock the best opportunities available to you. CFOs are creating a legacy, and it's time for you to leave your own unique imprint on the world today. That's all for now. See you on the next one.